A piercing scream shattered the quiet afternoon at the park, slicing through the gentle hum of conversation and children's laughter. The sudden sound sent a ripple of panic across the playground, turning joy into confusion in a matter of seconds. Children scattered in every direction, their games abandoned mid-motion as fear replaced excitement. Parents froze mid-step, some clutching their toddlers tightly while others instinctively reached for their phones. Amid the chaos, one man's heart began to race before he even understood why. Jake Miller, a single father and former soldier, had been sitting on a weathered wooden bench near the swings. His eyes had been fixed on his son Liam, who soared happily back and forth, carefree and full of life. The late afternoon sun dipped behind a row of tall oak trees, casting a golden glow across the park. Dust motes floated lazily in the light, giving the moment a quiet, almost dreamlike quality. Jake had learned to treasure moments like this, simple and peaceful, far removed from the chaos of his past. But here, watching Liam laugh, everything felt still, almost normal. Then the scream came again, sharper this time, impossible to ignore. Jake's instincts ignited instantly, honed by years of training and survival. He sprang to his feet, his eyes scanning the playground with practiced precision. At first, all he saw was disordered children running, parents shouting, confusion spreading. Then his focus locked onto a single point near the sandbox. A young girl, no older than 14, was being shoved against the wooden edge by a much larger boy. Her small frame trembled as she struggled, her hands weak against his forceful grip. Without hesitation, Jake moved, his boots crunching loudly against the gravel path. In just seconds, he closed the distance and stood between them. "Hey, let her go," he commanded, his voice low but filled with undeniable authority. The boy froze briefly, startled by the sudden intervention. But arrogance quickly replaced surprise, and he tried to shove back in defiance. He grabbed the boy's arm and twisted just enough to force him to release his grip. The girl stumbled forward, collapsing against Jake as sobs shook her fragile frame. Jake steadied her, his strong arms offering safety as he shielded her from further harm. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, his voice softening as he assessed her condition. He scanned her quickly, searching for visible injuries, but found none beyond fear itself. Her wide eyes told a different story, filled with terror that lingered beneath the surface. "Yes. Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling and barely audible. Her hands clutched her backpack tightly as if it were the only thing anchoring her. Jake noticed small details that others might miss in the moment. Her uniform was neat, her shoes spotless, and her posture carried an unusual grace. Even shaken, she seemed composed in a way that suggested a different upbringing. Something about her presence stirred a quiet instinct in him, one beyond simple duty. "Who did this to you?" Jake asked calmly, careful not to overwhelm her. "The boy, he wanted my phone," she stammered, struggling through her fear. Jake nodded, a familiar heaviness settling into his chest. He had seen enough of life to know danger often came without warning. Gently, he guided her away from the sandbox toward a safer path. "Come on," he said quietly. "Let's get you somewhere safe." At that moment, Liam ran up to them, concern written across his young face. "I'm fine, buddy," Jake replied, offering a reassuring smile. As he glanced back at the girl, a strange unease settled within him. There was something about her that felt familiar, though he was certain they had never met. Her eyes, her quiet strength, it all tugged at something deep within him. "Thanks for helping me," she said softly, her voice steadier now. She hesitated, as though unsure whether to say more. I didn't know who else to call," she admitted. Jake gave a small nod, understanding more than she realized. "You did the right thing by screaming," he said. "That's how people notice." For a moment, the park seemed suspended in time again. Children clung to their parents, whispering about what had just happened. A gentle breeze moved through the trees, carrying the scent of earth and distant flowers. Jake's thoughts briefly drifted to his past, to moments where survival depended on seconds. But this felt different, more personal, more human. Protecting this girl wasn't about duty, it was about doing what was right. She finally spoke again, her voice quiet but more composed. "I live nearby, I just didn't expect this," she said. Jake offered a reassuring smile. "You're safe now." "My name's Jake Miller," he added. Emily, she replied softly, meeting his gaze for the first time. For a brief moment, her eyes searched his, as if trying to understand him. Jake felt that same strange pull again, something he couldn't explain. They walked a few steps together, the tension slowly fading. Liam moved ahead, his curiosity returning as the moment passed. Jake's thoughts turned to his responsibilities as a single father. Keeping Liam safe had always been his priority. But now, it felt like that instinct extended beyond just his son. What he didn't know was that Emily was no ordinary girl. She was Emily Hawthorne, daughter of one of the most powerful CEOs in the city. At that very moment, her father was already on his way to the park. Michael Hawthorne had received fragmented reports that something had happened. A call from the school and a message from a passerby had been enough to alarm him. His eyes quickly found his daughter standing beside a stranger. Jake stood tall and calm, his presence steady and protective. Michael's pulse quickened as questions filled his mind. Who was this man, and why was he standing so close to Emily? There was something about him, an aura of quiet authority. Emily, Michael called, his voice cutting through the air. Emily turned instantly, relief flooding her expression. Dad, she whispered, stepping toward him. Jake instinctively stepped back, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Sir, Jake began, unsure how to explain. Michael stopped a few feet away, studying him carefully. His sharp eyes assessed everything in seconds. Jake's posture, his composure, his calm demeanor all noted instantly. Thank you for keeping an eye on her, Michael said carefully. His tone carried both gratitude and guarded caution. Emily stepped forward, sensing the tension between them. Dad, it's okay. He saved me, she said. Michael's expression softened slightly, though his questions remained. Saved you? And yet, I don't know who you are, he replied. I'm just a dad, sir. I saw a child in danger, Jake answered honestly. There was no pride in his voice, only simple truth. Michael studied him for a long moment, weighing his words. Finally, he gave a small nod, acknowledging him. It wasn't trust, but it was enough for now. As they prepared to leave, Emily glanced back at Jake. Her eyes were filled with gratitude and quiet curiosity. Thanks, she whispered once more. Jake gave a small smile before turning toward Liam. Come on, buddy. Let's head home, he said. But even as he walked away, his thoughts lingered on Emily. There was something about her he couldn't explain. And for Emily, the moment stayed with her just as strongly. This stranger had stepped into her life at exactly the right moment. As Jake walked toward his car, Liam's hand in his, a feeling settled deep within him. This hadn't been just a random encounter. Something had shifted, something had begun. Across the city, Michael Hawthorne returned to his office, his mind racing. Jake Miller was not someone easily forgotten. There was something different about him. Something strong, something steady, something real. None of them knew it yet, but their lives had just become connected. A simple act of courage had set everything in motion. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, long shadows stretched across the park. Jake, Emily, and Michael had taken their first steps into something far greater. A story none of them could yet understand had quietly begun. He thought it was just a park incident. She thought she was safe. But neither of them knew how quickly their lives were about to collide, and how complicated the world around Emily truly was. The day after the park incident, Jake couldn't shake the memory of Emily's trembling hands, her wide, terrified eyes, or the way she had clung to him without hesitation. It wasn't that he was usually drawn to strangers, it was that in all his years he had rarely felt such a raw, urgent need to protect someone. Liam was still buzzing with energy, bouncing around their small apartment, but Jake was distracted. He rubbed his face wearily, thinking of the golden-haired girl he had saved. Something about her felt important. Not in a headline-grabbing way, but in a way that stirred an instinct buried deep in him, an instinct to keep her safe, to be there when danger arrived. Meanwhile, Emily woke up in her spacious bedroom in the Hawthorne estate, the sunlight streaming through heavy curtains and casting long patterns across the marble floor. She hadn't slept well, haunted by flashes of the bully's hands on her and the sudden relief of being rescued. When she thought of Jake Miller, her mind felt conflicted, a stranger, yet the safest presence she had ever known. She wondered who he really was. Was he a neighbor? A passerby, or something more? Her father, Michael Hawthorne, meanwhile, had not slept at all. Sitting in his private office, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city, he replayed every moment from yesterday. His instincts told him there was more to Jake than met the eye. A man who could intervene without hesitation, who could take control of a dangerous situation calmly, that was no ordinary passerby. Michael didn't yet know why, but he was drawn to the thought that Jake might become either an ally or a complication. By mid-morning, Jake had left Liam with a neighbor and decided to run a few errands. His phone buzzed. A number he didn't recognize appeared on the screen. Hesitating only briefly, he answered. "Mr. Miller?" a calm, professional voice said. "This is Michael Hawthorne. I believe you assisted my daughter yesterday at the park. I would like to speak with you in person." "Is that possible?" Jake blinked, momentarily stunned. Yes, sir, when?" "Today, noon, at the Hawthorne estate." "Come along," Michael replied, his tone precise, unyielding. "There are matters you need to understand regarding your involvement with Emily." The line went dead. Jake's chest tightened. Something in Michael's voice, so formal, so deliberate, made his instincts scream caution. But he also knew that ignoring it wasn't an option. He had saved a child yesterday. It was time to understand why a man of power was summoning him. At noon, Jake drove through the ornate gates of the Hawthorne estate. Guards in crisp uniforms nodded as he passed, eyes alert but respectful. Jake had seen wealth before, but this was different. It was precision, power, and control woven into every surface. Inside, he was led into a grand foyer where sunlight bounced off marble floors. Emily stood with her father, pale but composed, her golden hair perfectly in place. She looked different outside of the fear of yesterday, confident, poised, yet still vulnerable in a way Jake instinctively recognized. Emily glanced at him, a mixture of gratitude and curiosity in her eyes. "Dad, why did you want him here?" Michael's gaze flicked to his daughter, thoughtful. "Because there are things you should know about your life, and about why protecting you is more complicated than a playground incident." They moved to a private study, away from the soft murmur of servants and the distant hum of the city. The walls were lined with bookshelves, the furniture solid and imposing, the atmosphere tense. On the desk lay photographs, security reports, and handwritten notes. Jake's eyes scanned them, realizing immediately that Emily's life was far from ordinary. Michael began to speak, carefully, measured. "What happened in the park could have been much worse. People are watching. People who wouldn't hesitate to harm her for gain, for leverage, or simply because they can." Jake absorbed this quietly, the weight of responsibility settling heavier on his shoulders. He had thought saving Emily was the end of the danger. He had been wrong. Emily stepped closer, her voice shaking slightly. "I didn't know. It's scary. Dad, I don't want to live like this." Jake knelt slightly to meet her gaze, trying to provide comfort. "Emily, listen to me. You don't have to face this alone." "You won't be facing it alone." "But trust alone is not enough in my world, not in this city." Emily's eyes met Jake's. I just knew you'd be there. That you'd protect me." Jake's jaw tightened as he held her gaze. "I promised once, Emily. I'll do it again if I have to. No one touches you while I'm around." There was a silence after his words, filled with unspoken tension and mutual understanding. Outside, the city's hum continued obliviously. But inside the estate, time felt suspended, every second carrying the weight of decisions, loyalty, and the unknown threats that lurked beyond the walls. Suddenly, the study window rattled, a small tremor that made everyone jump. Guards outside stiffened. Jake's instincts immediately flared. "Did you hear that?" Emily whispered, clutching her father's arm. Michael's eyes narrowed, scanning the view beyond the window. Shadows moved across the gardens, figures hidden behind trees, watching, waiting. A chill ran down Jake's spine. This wasn't just observation, it was a threat. He moved to the window, crouching slightly to get a better angle. "They're here," he muttered, low but clear. "Someone's watching, someone dangerous." Michael straightened, his corporate composure giving way to instinctive urgency. "We need to move her to a secure location, now." Emily looked at Jake, eyes wide. "What's happening?" Jake pulled her slightly behind him. "Stay calm. Don't speak unless you have to. I've got you. The three of them moved quickly through hidden corridors Michael had designed for emergencies. Jake's military training kicked in, fully, routes memorized in seconds, awareness heightened, tension coiling like a spring in his chest. Every step was calculated, deliberate, protective. Emily stayed close, her hand gripping his jacket, trusting him fully, completely. Finally, they reached a reinforced room at the heart of the estate. The door closed behind them with a solid thud. Jake leaned against the wall, exhaling sharply. "They won't get in here," he assured her. Emily looked up at him, her fear slowly giving way to awe. You're amazing." "I don't even know how to thank you." Jake's face softened, almost with a smile. "You don't have to. Just stay safe. That's all I need." Michael entered, his expression thoughtful. "Jake, I've seen many people in my life. Soldiers, politicians, business partners. Few inspire the kind of instinct to protect others without question. You're different. I may not understand it fully, but Emily needs someone like you. Someone with heart." Jake's jaw tightened, his mind already thinking ahead. Protecting Emily was no longer just a moral choice. It was a strategic necessity. And for the first time in years, he felt the full weight of responsibility pressing down on him. As evening fell, the estate grew quiet, but the unease remained. Shadows lengthened across the gardens, movements just beyond the perimeter catching the corner of Jake's eye. He sat beside Emily, watching her carefully. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "we figure out who's targeting you, and why." Emily nodded, resting her head against his shoulder briefly. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel safe, even if just a little. But Jake knew better. Safety, in her world or any world, was temporary. And as he looked out into the gardens, the glimmer of movement in the fading light reminded him that danger was patient, clever, and relentless. Cliffhanger ending. Jake had stepped into Emily's world out of instinct, out of duty, out of compassion. He thought he understood the threat. He thought he was prepared. But the shadows outside the estate whispered a truth neither he nor Emily were ready to face. The danger was closer, deeper, and far more personal than anyone had imagined. And by morning, everything they thought they knew about safety, trust, and protection would be tested. He was about to learn just how little he knew and how high the stakes really were. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Hawthorne estate, casting long geometric shadows across the marble floors. Jake sat at the breakfast table in one of the estate's lesser-used wings, his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, trying to steady his thoughts. Liam was safe at a neighbor's house, and Emily was somewhere in the house, still uneasy after yesterday's events. Jake's mind replayed every detail of the park incident. Every movement, every scream, every split second that had forced him to act. The memory of Emily's wide, frightened eyes haunted him not just for their fear, but for the quiet strength behind them. She wasn't just any child. She carried herself in a way that hinted at burdens far beyond her years. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. A man in a sharply pressed suit stepped inside, holding a small envelope. He didn't speak immediately, just extended it to Jake. Jake took it cautiously. The handwriting was elegant, formal, unfamiliar. He unfolded the letter. "Meet me in the study. There are matters regarding Emily you must understand. Come alone." Again, something about the formality of the note, the insistence on coming alone, made every instinct in Jake's body flare. This wasn't casual conversation. There were stakes here he couldn't yet see. By noon, Jake found himself walking through the grand halls of the estate again, the polished floors reflecting the sunlight like glass. Emily and Michael were already waiting in the study room. Jake had come to understand as both a sanctuary and a place where decisions were made that affected lives far beyond their own. Emily looked up at him as he entered. "Dad, why did you ask me to come here?" she asked, a mixture of apprehension and curiosity in her voice. Michael gestured for Jake to sit, his expression unreadable. "Because you need to understand, Jake. Emily's life is more complicated than a single incident in a park. She carries a tension that is dangerous, relentless, and unrelenting. What happened yesterday is only the beginning." Jake's brows furrowed. "Attention? From who?" Michael opened a folder. revealing photographs of people Emily didn't recognize and security reports documenting unusual activity near her school, her home, even her extracurricular activities. They see your daughter as leverage, as a target, or as a commodity, and the park incident yesterday could have been far worse. Emily's eyes widened as she leaned closer to her father. Targeted me? Michael nodded, his expression somber. Yes, and we need to be vigilant. That's why I asked Jake to come. He has instincts we need right now. Jake looked down at the papers, then back at Michael. So you're telling me this wasn't random? That the bully yesterday could have been connected? Michael gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Possibly. We can't rule it out. That's the point. Vigilance is everything now. Trust alone is not enough. Jake exhaled slowly. His protective instincts surged. Emily's safety was no longer a simple moral decision, it was tactical. And every choice, every movement mattered. For a moment the room was silent, heavy with unspoken truths. Then Emily spoke, her voice trembling slightly. Jake, why are you helping me? You don't have to, you don't even know me. Jake leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. I saw a child in danger yesterday. That's all it took, some things. You just don't ignore? Emily's lips quivered with a small smile, but the fear in her eyes remained. She glanced toward her father. Dad, do you think he's telling the truth? Michael studied Jake carefully, then nodded slowly. Instinct tells me he is, an instinct. Isn't something you can fake? Suddenly, a soft thud echoed from the window, startling them all. Shadows shifted just beyond the tall glass panes. Jake's muscles tensed instantly. He moved to the window, scanning the garden. Two figures, partially hidden behind the manicured hedges, watched them with silent intensity. They're here, Jake muttered, low and calm, but every muscle in his body was ready. Someone's watching, and they're not harmless. Emily gripped his arm instinctively. What do we do? Don't speak unless you have to. Michael moved to the desk, activating a hidden panic alarm and ensuring the reinforced door locks engaged. We need to control this before it escalates, he said, his corporate composure mingling with the urgency of a father protecting his child. Hours passed in tense silence, punctuated only by distant sounds of security patrols and the occasional rustle in the estate's expansive gardens. Jake sat near Emily, a protective presence, while Michael monitored surveillance feeds. The intruders did not move closer, but their persistence was clear. They were patient, calculating, waiting for a single misstep. Emily broke the silence quietly. Jake, do you ever get scared? He looked at her, surprised by the question. Of course. But fear tells you to be careful. Fear tells you to act, to protect, to survive. You use it, you don't let it control you. Emily's eyes reflected a mix of admiration and disbelief. You really mean it? Jake gave a small nod. I do, and I'm not leaving you alone in this. Michael watched the exchange quietly. He had seen many people in his life, soldiers, advisors, business partners, but few inspired the kind of instinct to act selflessly that Jake did. And now, more than ever, he realized that instinct might be Emily's only shield in a world she didn't fully understand. As dusk fell, the shadows outside grew longer. Movement flickered near the perimeter again, signaling that the observers were not gone. Jake rose, moving to a reinforced corner of the room, assessing all exits, all angles, all threats. His military training guided every thought. Every possible danger had a response, and he had already begun planning contingencies in his mind. Emily stayed close, her trust in him absolute. Jake, promise me, she whispered. I promise, he said immediately, his voice low but steady. Michael stepped beside them, placing a hand briefly on Jake's shoulder. We are in your hands for now, but know this. The threats outside are patient. They will test every boundary. Jake nodded, absorbing the weight of the statement. Protecting Emily was no longer about instinct alone, it was strategy, vigilance, and courage. And every second, every choice, could be the difference between safety and disaster. The night deepened, and the city outside glittered in indifferent light. But inside the Hawthorne estate, tension simmered like a low flame, threatening to ignite. Jake sat quietly, watching Emily finally drift into a fitful sleep on a chaise near the window. The warmth of her presence and her trust weighed heavily on him. He knew the next steps were uncertain. He knew danger was closer than they realized. And then, from the corner of the room, a small sound, a tap, almost imperceptible, made Jake freeze. Someone was inside the estate. Someone was moving silently, deliberately. Jake's hand went to the hidden baton at his belt. Emily stirred slightly, half awake, sensing the change in the room. Michael stiffened, his corporate composure replaced with instinctual vigilance. This was no longer a matter of warning or surveillance. The intruders had made their move. Jake Miller had thought saving a girl in a park was the extent of his involvement. He had been wrong. Emily's life was a web of danger, secrets, and shadows, and tonight, those shadows had come alive. One wrong move could cost everything. And as Jake prepared to confront the threat, he realized this night would test not just his skill, but his heart, his courage, and his resolve in ways he never imagined. The shadows had closed in. Jake knew that tonight nothing would be ordinary. One misstep, one wrong move, and everything he fought for, everything Emily had, could vanish in an instant. The mansion was silent, but the air felt electric, charged with tension. Outside, the night pressed against the estate like a living thing, every rustle, every faint movement a potential threat. His heartbeat was steady, but every nerve was alert, every instinct screaming danger. Emily stirred from her fitful sleep, sitting up just enough to whisper, "Jake, what's happening?" Jake turned, crouching low to meet her gaze. "Stay calm, stay quiet, don't move." Michael stepped closer, his usual composed demeanor replaced with quiet tension. "Jake, they're skilled. Not amateurs, this is personal." Jake's jaw tightened. "Then we treat it like it is." The quiet was broken by the faintest click, the sound of a lock disengaging somewhere deeper in the house. Jake's eyes narrowed. Someone had breached the perimeter. Through the night corridors, shadows moved swiftly, deliberately, their steps muffled but precise. Jake slipped silently toward the source, every step measured. He knew the estate's layout intimately now, every hidden passage, every reinforced door. His military training guided him like a map, his focus absolute. Emily clutched Michael's arm, but Jake gestured for her to stay back, his presence a protective shield even without words. "Trust me," he whispered. "Stay hidden." The intruders entered the study. Two men, dressed in black, their faces obscured, armed but cautious. They expected fear, hesitation, perhaps chaos, but they hadn't counted on Jake. In an instant, he moved, a blur of precision and controlled force. One man lunged at him with a knife. Jake sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and disarmed him in a single, fluid motion. The second attacker fired blindly, a gunshot echoing off the high ceilings. Jake dove to the side, rolling, grabbing the weapon from the floor, and using it to neutralize the threat without endangering Emily or Michael. Emily's eyes widened in shock, but also relief. She had never seen someone move with such focus, such skill, yet also such restraint. Michael, though shaken, recognized the precision. "Jake, you weren't exaggerating," he said under his breath, almost awed. The fight was brief but intense. Jake's experience gave him the edge, but the intruders were skilled. Every strike, every movement had to be calculated. He couldn't afford mistakes. And he couldn't allow Emily to see more than necessary. Finally, the last intruder went down, unconscious but alive. Jake exhaled sharply, pressing his hands to his knees to steady himself. His eyes quickly scanned the room, ensuring Emily was safe. Emily emerged from behind the desk, trembling but unharmed. "Jake, you saved me," she whispered, her voice shaky, full of awe and gratitude. Jake gave her a small, reassuring smile. "That's what I'm here for. You're safe now." Michael stepped forward, his gaze shifting between Emily and Jake. "Tonight, you proved more than courage. You proved loyalty, control, and instinct. Emily's life, her safety. It wasn't just luck. It was you." The night outside remained still, but Jake knew this was only the beginning. The intruders were connected to something larger, someone with resources, someone patient, someone who would test them again. But for now, in this moment, Emily was safe, and that was enough. Emily looked up at Jake, her eyes glistening. I don't know how to thank you. You didn't just save me, you made me feel safe, really safe." Jake crouched to meet her gaze. You don't have to thank me, Emily. You just have to remember one thing. You are stronger than anyone thinks. And sometimes all it takes is a little courage to face what comes next. Michael watched them, understanding dawning. This was a life, a human being, someone he loved. And tonight, Jake Miller had earned a place in that circle. The morning sun rose over the estate, casting warm light across the gardens. The threat had passed, for now. Jake stood with Emily and Michael on the terrace, the cool breeze brushing against their faces. Emily's expression had softened. The fear of the night was replaced with gratitude and trust. Michael turned to Jake. You should stay here, at least until we know more. We owe you that much, and Emily, she trusts you. I trust you. Jake nodded. His mind wandered briefly to Liam, waiting at the neighbor's house, unaware of the night's events. Family, protection, instinct, they all blended together now. I'll stay, he said quietly. But I need to know everything about who might come next, about what we're up against. Michael smiled faintly. You'll get the briefing, and Emily, you'll have someone watching your back, always. Emily stepped closer, a small smile forming. Jake, promise me something? Jake looked down at her. Anything. Promise? You'll stay in my life, not just as the man who saved me, but as someone who understands me, someone I can trust. Jake's chest tightened. I promise, Emily, always. Weeks passed, and life began to settle into a fragile rhythm. Emily returned to school, more aware of the shadows lurking around her, yet stronger because she knew she wasn't alone. Michael took extra precautions but learned to rely on Jake, whose presence became both guardian and guide. Jake returned to his life with Liam, but the weight of responsibility had shifted. No longer was he just a single dad trying to keep his son safe now. He had a purpose that extended beyond his own household. A child's life, a father's trust, and a new bond had formed. Emily and Jake met in quiet moments walks in the park, shared coffee, and the occasional laughter that broke through tension. Each encounter strengthened their bond, creating a sense of family beyond blood. And though danger had passed for now, Jake remained vigilant. Shadows, after all, never truly disappear, they only wait. But he was ready. He had trained for life's chaos. He had survived missions, war zones, and threats most could never imagine. And now, he had something far more personal to protect a child's trust, a father's peace, and the fragile thread of safety that connected them all. One afternoon, Emily looked up at Jake, her voice soft but full of certainty. Thank you for everything. Not just for saving me, but for believing in me. Jake smiled, ruffling her hair gently. Always, Emily, you don't have to face anything alone. Not ever. And in that moment, amidst the quiet of the Hawthorne estate, the bond between soldier, child, and family was sealed. Courage, loyalty, and love had carried them through the darkness, and together they had found light.